Apple cider vinegar is a popular food supplement and has been for years, and for good reason. According to Dr. Eric Berg in his excellent video available on YouTube, 9 apple cider vinegar health benefits, and according to various other health aficionados such as Paul and Patricia Bragg, apple cider vinegar has many of the following benefits. It is rich in enzymes, it helps boost digestion, it speeds up digestion, it activates acid activated enzymes in the pancreas and stomach that are needed for good digestion. It helps reduce pathogens in the body and reduce bacterial overgrowth. It helps preserve food and helps slow the growth of microbes. It helps prevent SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It helps you absorb minerals such as calcium, magnesium, and iron, which require a specific pH to be absorbed properly. It helps you absorb certain vitamins such as vitamin C, vitamin K, and B12, which also need proper acid to be absorbed. It can decrease gas, bloating, and indigestion. It decreases acid reflux by causing the valve in the stomach to close properly. It helps your body release bile and pancreatic enzymes. It helps your body break down protein better and thus provides you with more amino acids. It helps with blood sugar issues and also helps reduce insulin resistance. It helps with weight loss. It helps reduce cholesterol. It helps reduce high blood pressure. And it helps your immune system and helps the white blood cells fight infection. Personally, I have noticed that apple cider vinegar is also beneficial for gallbladder dysfunction, gallstones, and gallbladder attacks. It helps with eating out at restaurants when you may consume poor quality fats and oils, high salt, and heavy proteins. It is often high in potassium. Potassium helps the body excrete water, such as in edema, and potassium is a very important mineral in the body. And when taken in the morning with water, lemon juice, and wheatgrass juice powder, such as Dr. Eric Berg talks about, it can definitely help with weight loss and reduction of cellulite. I have personally experienced this and have some of my friends and family members. Back in the late 90s and around the year 2000, I had read a lot about apple cider vinegar and tried using it. I didn't notice any of the benefits I was reading about. This was discouraging. I later tried using some of the raw, organic, with the mother apple cider vinegars on the market and still didn't notice a big improvement. This was even more discouraging. Years later, I learned about the quality and the type of apple cider vinegar you use and that it makes a huge difference. I eventually learned how to make my own apple cider vinegar from scratch, which, by the way, is really easy, and then started noticing all the benefits people had talked about. Wow, finally. Plus, the homemade stuff tastes a lot better than the store stuff, which I later learned the store apple cider vinegars are often diluted with water to a 5% acidity, or they're pasteurized. No wonder they're not helpful. After making the homemade apple cider vinegar, I then started making vinegar from lemons, oranges, plums, peaches, fresh ginger, pineapple skins, etc. I was hooked. So fun. And they were all different, all containing different properties and benefits. But the apple cider vinegar is still my very favorite and is something I make constantly and rely on a lot. It's really important stuff. Let's get to the video and I'll show you how to make it, strain it, and bottle it. Hi everybody, today we are going to make apple cider vinegar. So this is actually incredibly simple. The few things that you're going to need are, number one, a jar. You can make as little or as much as you like. I usually do a gallon at a time because we use a lot of apple cider vinegar. So if you don't want to make that much, you can do a quart. You can even do a half gallon. It really is up to you. But like I say, it takes about a month to make. So if you're going to go through quite a bit of it, you might want to make at least a gallon at a time. The other thing that you're going to need, obviously, are apples and a good knife. And then you're going to need some kind of a natural sugar. You can actually use any kind of sugar that you want. It can just be plain old white sugar. It doesn't matter. This is what you call sucanat, and I'll kind of zoom this up here a little bit. It's granular, and what this is evaporated cane juice, and so it's brown because it still has the brown sugar in it. It still has all the minerals in it. And so whenever you see sugar that is brown, that means that you still have a lot of the minerals, which is really good. You want minerals. Minerals are what build your body. So that's a very positive thing. The other thing that you're going to need is water. So make sure you have some really good clean water, not with chlorine. You don't want chlorine in any of your fermented foods because the chlorine will kill them. So let's get started and I'll show you how absolutely easy this is. Okay, so here we have several different types of things, and I wanted to show you that you have a lot of options with making vinegar. So let me move this stuff real quick here. So whenever you have your choice of apples, there's a lot of different things you can use. These are nice, fresh, really pretty apples. You can use those, any type that you want. I have this apple that's a little scary looking. It's not rotten. It's just been bruised and banged up, and it's kind of soft and sort of squishy. You can use this too. These are some apple slices that I had cut up for my boys for supper. They didn't eat all of them. They're still good. They're just starting to turn just a hair brown. You can also use these. So say if you make a pie or something like that and you peeled off the peels, which I usually don't, but for this particular one I did, you can even freeze these things and use the cores, use the peels, anything like that. So these are actually frozen apple peels, and you can use those also. You can also make vinegar with just cores if you want. I would not recommend doing just cores, but if that's all you've got, then that's all you can do that. Okay, before we start making this, there's a couple things that you guys do need to be aware of. I've had a lot of people ask, well, what about the seeds? Aren't the seeds poisonous? Don't the seeds contain arsenic? Well, yes, they have a little tiny bit. But I started doing research on it, and the amount of seeds that you actually would have to eat to get arsenic poisoning is pounds and pounds and pounds of seeds. You could never ever eat that many seeds. So I have been making apple cider vinegar for years now, and I use the seeds, and it has had no effect whatsoever. So if you want to eat mountains of apple seeds, then yeah, I would be concerned. Otherwise, don't even worry about it. The other thing too to be aware of is, say you have crab apples, those little bitty guys, or just some kind of a little wild apple. We get some from the ranch sometimes that are just a really small apple. You can also use those, but when you do that, you need to make sure that they are cut incredibly small, because when you make apple cider vinegar, or any vinegar for that fact, the main thing that you're looking for is surface area. You want to make sure that you have enough surface area that is touching water, that is exposed to the bacteria, and is also exposed to the sugar in there that's also going to be breaking down. So if you cut your apples into these great big huge chunks, say I just cut this into big slices, that's not going to be good, because you want a lot of surface area so that the bacteria can react on the fruit and break it down faster. So you want to make sure that your apples are cut into very, very small pieces. And so back to the crab apples, if you are using those, crab apples and small apples have a very dense flesh. So on a regular apple, you can kind of break it and it's sort of pithy. On some of the crab apples and some of these other varieties, they're very, very tightly knit together, very dense. So you have to make sure that you cut those into very, very small pieces. You might even want to grate them or use a machine to slice them incredibly thin, because you need that surface area. And I say this from experience because I did not do this with a batch of crab apples. And what happened is 2 weeks into the ferment, I tested it and it was still in its alcohol stage. So it took twice as long. And the other thing, if you're using crab apples or really small apples, they don't have a lot of sugar, natural sugar in them. So you need to make sure that you double the amount of sugar. So I'll show you what I do for that. And just keep that in mind. Okay, so here we have our apples again. So if you want to use just a good apple, this is what I do very, very quickly. Just start just cutting it into chunks. You don't have to do any particular thing fancy. Just start getting it into small pieces. So I cut it into slices first, then I flipped over half, and I'm going to cut it into matchsticks. So it actually looks kind of like this, several pieces. But if you can keep it all together like I did here, it makes it very easy to cut up. And then just take your knife and cut into pieces so you've got these little bitty squares. So the smaller the better. So like this one here, same thing, just cut it really small. If you get even smaller than that, no worries, that's great. You just don't want to, let me show you here, spinny apple. Some people, when they cut up apples, they'll say, oh, well, here, I'm going to make vinegar. Let's do chunks like this. No, these are too big. These will take forever to break down, and you actually need to try to get inside these pieces. So these are not good for making vinegar. So sometimes I'll see pictures of people making vinegar, and they have these great big huge chunks of fruit in there. That is not good. That will take forever, and they really won't break down well. So again, I'm leaving the cores in here. Not a problem. So just keep however you like to cut stuff up. Just start chopping away. Okay, so same with these apple slices. They're already sort of cut, and so a lot of times what I'll do is cut them in half and then just chop them into little small squares again. And when you have something like these frozen peels, they're already very, very small, so I'm not going to cut these up at all. And same with apple cores, you don't need to cut those into small pieces either. So, and same with old mushy apple here. Let's cut him open and see what he looks like. So see, the inside looks really good. It's just the outside is scabby looking. So as long as you don't have any mold or any rot on this, this is perfectly fine. You do not want mold and rot. That is definitely not a good thing. So this is a little bit harder to cut because it is spongy. But again, I'm just going to cut this into little bitty small squares. So I'm going to stop the video here and just finish cutting all these up, and then we'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've cut up those apple slices and that little mushy apple and that other apple. And so the next step is to put them into your jar. So again, this is a gallon jar. And let me put this where you can actually see all this stuff going on here. All right, so here's my bag of frozen apple peels. I'm just going to dump that into the jar. And again, use apple cores, use whatever you've got. A lot of times in the pioneer days, they would make apple cider vinegar out of their apple cores because they would actually eat the apples and use the apples. If you do use the cores only, you're going to need to increase the sugar. All right, so when you fill up this jar, you need to have this jar about 1/3 full of apple pieces. You can even go as much as half the jar full if you want, but that's going to be, sometimes you'll get too much fruit and you actually are looking for the liquidy part of it. So you don't want to fill this jar up 3/4 full or 2/3. That's too much. Half is max. So half to 1/3 full of fruit. Okay, so I'm just dumping these in here. Okay, shake that down. That's perfect. So you can see that as not quite a half, but it's just about 1/3 full of apples. Okay, so then the next step is you're going to take your sugar, and if you're making a gallon size, you want 1/2 cup of sugar. So this is a 1/4 cup measure, so I'm going to do 1/4 cup and another 1/4 cup, which is half, a little extra here. Now, if, again, you are using those little bitty small dense apples, you want to make sure that you double the amount of sugar. So if you're using crab apples or those little tight little dense apples, you want to put about 1 cup of sugar into this jar. Okay, then once you put the sugar in, our filtered water and just start filling up the jar. And you don't want to go right to the very top, because what's going to happen over time is this is going to start bubbling, but I go pretty close. So I leave about 1 inch to 2 inches of space at the top, if you can see where that's at. And something else that I really, really like, these are chopsticks, but this is a cooking chopstick. So as you can tell, it's very long. And this works really well for stirring. In fact, chopsticks in my kitchen are something that gets used just as much as any other utensil. So just start stirring this, and you can start to see that sugar mix in. And you don't have to get it completely mixed, because it will break down over time. That's it. That's your vinegar. So you then take one of these little bonnets or a piece of cloth, cheesecloth, whatever you've got, snap it over the top, put a rubber band on it. And this is now going to sit on your countertop for 2 to 4 weeks. And I'll explain that here just in a second. Something that I like to do is, this is freezer tape, and I like it a lot better than regular tape because it actually sticks. A lot of other things come off. And so I will put down here, I'll say, okay, so this particular vinegar is apple, and I'll put that I put 1/2 cup of sucanat in it, and the date. So write down today's date, and I'll rip this off. And I'm not going to show you guys because it's going to be backwards for you, and it will look like I'm writing in some little strange language. So, and then I'll stick it to the jar here so that I remember what this is, how much sugar is in it, and the date that it was made. Okay, something else that you also might want to do is take some kind of a dish, kind of like a large bowl, and put your vinegar in it, because as this ferments, it's going to start bubbling. And I'm going to show you some of the other ones that I've been making here recently. But this will get very, very foamy and bubbly, and it's going to leak some out the top. So you want to make sure that that catches that. All right, as this sits on the countertop, you're going to want to stir this every single day. And here, let me move this up for just a second. Okay, the reason you want to stir this is because mold that floats in the air really likes fruit. And so even though you have this on the top, and linen has the tendency to be mold resistant, it still is going to try to get in there. And what's going to happen is, on this top surface, if you do not stir this every single day, you're going to potentially get a little layer of mold. And it can be green or kind of like a gray color, sometimes even blackish. But if you take your chopstick or whatever chopstick you have, and every single day just give this a good stir so everything gets moving around, keep that top moving, you won't ever get mold. And also, as it starts bubbling and really fermenting, you can knock some of those carbon dioxide bubbles out, and it will keep things from boiling over as much. And so one way I like to think of that is kind of like a pond. When you have a pond that does not have fresh water moving into it, it just sits and it gets stagnant and it grows slime and moss and all kinds of creepy stuff. So it's kind of like your vinegar here. But say if you have a stream that is moving, constantly flowing, it doesn't sit there and grow all this nasty stuff on the top. Well, your vinegar is the same way. Keep it moving. So again, just stir it once a day is plenty. And if you forget, which life happens, all of a sudden 3 days go by and you're like, oh my goodness, I completely forgot to stir my vinegar, and you take off the lid and oh voila, we have mold growing. Don't worry about it. It's not going to ruin your entire ferment. What you can do is scrape off that first layer of fruit that has the mold on it, pick out the pieces that have the mold and throw them away, feed them to your chickens, whatever you want to do, put them in your compost and give it a good stir, and it's fine. I have actually done that many, many times, forgetting to stir it, and it has been absolutely fine. Now I have 2 jars here that I've been making that I want to show you, and I purposefully let one sit so that you can see another type of yeast or type of it's like a mold, and I'll show you what this looks like so you're not afraid of it if you see this on your vinegars. Okay, so these are 2 jars of vinegar that I've been making for, let me put this down here. There we go. Oops, there we go. Okay, so this one has been going for about a month and a week, and I purposely let it really go long so that you could see this calm yeast that grows on the top. This one has been going for about 2 weeks, and I want to show you what it starts to look like. But let's talk about this one first. So this is what your vinegar looks like when it is a month old. As you'll start to see, all those apples that were floating all on the top. For instance, let me show you the one that we just made. The apples all float. They look nice and fresh. This one being a month old, they're not all floating and they don't look all fresh. They look kind of like a mushy applesauce, kind of a gross looking thing on the bottom. And on the top, this is called calm yeast. Hope you guys can see that it's sort of white and bubbly looking. This will not hurt you. A lot of times people go, ooh, scary, scary, this looks dangerous. It's not. This will grow on sauerkraut. This will grow on beet kvass. Anything that has any type of a sugar in it, it will grow on the surface. Now, it tastes nasty, it's bitter, and so I would highly recommend skimming this off. You don't want this in your ferments, but this will not hurt you. Okay, this one has been going for about 2 weeks, and I want to show you what's happening here. So it's starting to get breakdown on the bottom of the apples. This is very good, you want this to happen, but we still have a ton floating at the top, so it has about 2 more weeks to go. So I have people ask me, well, how long do you have to ferment your vinegar? So typically 4 weeks. 4 weeks is perfect. You can go longer than that if you want, and you can also do less than that if you want. If you only go for 2 weeks, you're going to get a very, very sweet vinegar, and those can actually be quite delicious. I make several vinegars with oranges and, well, fresh oranges, also orange peels, lemons and lemon peels, and fresh lemons. So there's the choices and varieties of vinegars you can make are just astounding. But with the fresh whole lemons, sometimes I will let that one ferment for 2 weeks and almost drink that as like my own personal soda pop. It's so yummy. And I will mix that with kombucha. Oh my goodness, absolutely fantastic. So 4 weeks ferment, unless if you want still fairly sweet, 2 weeks. So we are now going to learn how to strain off vinegars. This is my one that I just showed you that has the calm yeast on the top and is over a month old. So let's get to it. Okay, bump this down here. All right, so again, that yeast is not something that you want. This typically is not growing on the top, but I let this go longer to show you what happens if it sits longer. Because usually when you have your vinegars that are ready to use, this is not growing on the top. So you don't have to skim this off, but I wanted to give you the most extreme situation in case if you're like, oh, this showed up on my vinegars, what do I do? Scary, scary. So just skim this off, and again, I'll show you what this looks like. If you can see it, it's just kind of lumpy, bumpy. So just take this off. Now, if you have compost or chickens, they absolutely love this stuff. That chickens especially, you would think, oh, well, chickens wouldn't eat these vinegar apples. Oh, yes, they will, and they think they're delicious. Okay, so once I've got most of that yeast off the top, we will start straining it. All right, the yeast is all skimmed off the top. typically when you're ready to make vinegar, this is what it normally looks like. You'll normally have just these few little floating apples on the top. So this is what you want to get ready to start straining. All right, my friend that sews all the linen stuff, we went through this up and down trying to figure out how to make a bag that would actually strain this well. This is a very, very fine mesh linen, and growing up on the ranch, I would milk cows, and the shape of udders works very well for hands for squeezing, you know, so you can squeeze things incredibly well. So we wound up making this bag that's kind of like this udder shape. Now, when you first start, you need to make sure that the bag that you use is moist and wet, because if it is not, it will drink your vinegar. And that's a little disappointing if you spent a month trying to make it and have your bag drink it all. So make sure that your bag is moist, wring that out. Again, you can tell there's no water comes out of here but a few drops. You just want it damp. You don't want it sopping wet. Okay, so then you take this, and then you're going to need another jar. You can use the half-gallon jars, which these are just pickle jars, or you can use another gallon jar. It really does not matter. And if anybody's interested in these bags, you can just comment below on the video, and we're going to have these available for sale. And these happen to have like a stretchy rubber band top in them, which is really nice because they just snap right onto your jar and they hold on really tight. If you do not have one of these bags, you're going to want to find something that is a fine, fine mesh, and that is incredibly important because you don't want something with big holes in it, because you want to catch every little bit of apple pulp that comes out of here, because if you do not, it will continue to ferment and you'll have a bubbly mess inside your jars. So take your jar with all your apples and just pour that into that bag. And I know some people have asked, well, what about like the cheesecloth that you would use to make jelly and stuff like that? Cheesecloth usually is not fine enough. You might be able to double or triple it and make sure you get the really high quality stuff that you can wash, but some of the cheesecloths that have the big holes in it will not work. So again, just make sure that whatever you use has very, very fine, tight weave to it, fine, tight texture. Okay, so as you can see, what's going on here is that vinegar is filtering out, and so all of your apples that are coming out are left inside this bag. So the next thing that you're going to need are jars. I still have labels on some of these. These happen to be big kombucha bottles, and I like these because they are strong. And so these are the large commercial kombucha bottles. And the other thing that you're going to need is a nice big funnel. And so I'll just show you one at a time. So what I'll do is I'll put this funnel, and it's just nothing fancy here, into that bottle. And then I'm going to snap this off and lift this up. Make sure your hands are clean and washed, and just start squeezing. This is what I was talking about, milking the cow. Except you usually don't milk from the top down, but you get the general idea. And just start squeezing, because there is a lot of vinegar that is left inside these apples. And so just kind of, I'm pinching it. I don't know if you can see that either, but just pinch almost in this kind of a way, because again, I try to touch it as little as possible. And if you're making this for other people or commercially, you could even use plastic gloves. Just whatever it is, try to handle it as little as possible, because again, you have bacteria on your hands, and even though this vinegar is very acidic and can resist some of those bacteria because it is a natural preservative, you still don't want to be contaminating it. So just continue to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, and you keep squeezing until you get very little vinegar coming out of that bag. Because again, you don't want to waste whatever vinegar is in here. Now, okay, I've been squeezing on this for quite a while, and if you'll notice, there's not very much liquid coming out of here now. And all those apples that were clear up to here, I've squished all the way down, and I have this very hard knot on the bottom. And there's mostly just a little bit of pulp left in here. All right, so this pulp, I'll show you what this looks like. So just kind of dump your bag upside down here and give it a good shake. Put that in there. So what you're left with is just kind of this dryish sort of apple mush. And again, chicken apple pie, yum, yum, yum. They love it. So then I'm going to take my big bottle with my funnel. Just take this big jar and just start pouring it in there. And it's funny, this particular vinegar is kind of syrupy. Some of them are very thin, some of them are kind of syrupy. It just depends on the type of apples that you use, and each one be a little bit different. And that's the fun part about vinegar, is that you never know what you're going to get. Like I say, this one's very kind of yellowish and thickish. And so some of the ones that I have made have been very thin and fine, almost like a maple syrup type color, or very, very watery. So each one's a little different. Now you want to cap this, and I'll show you that last stage. All right, so this is just one of the lids that comes on these jars commercially, plastic. So I just put that on the top there. And then the other thing that a lot of times that I'll do is, when I first make the vinegar and I'm putting the labels on, I'll double label. And I'll show you why that is. Let me scoot this all over here. So this is the beauty of using freezer tape, is that it remains sticky with lots of stickings and unstickings. So I will put this on my jar. So now it says that this is apple, half a cup of sucanat, the date that it was made. And then I'm going to take my Sharpie marker here and write down the date that I strained it. But the nice thing about labeling this is that you will know how old this is. So if it goes and sits in your basement for a while, you'll be able to say, oh, well, this one's a month old. Oh, okay, well, this one is a year old. And so you'll kind of know. So all right, so this one's ready to go, ready to sit down in your basement or to be used right away, whatever it is that you want to do with this. So let's finish this up. All right, so here's our other bottle with the funnel. I'm going to pour the rest of this vinegar into here. And the nice thing about making a gallon at a time, you typically have enough to fill these big kombucha bottles full. And occasionally what will happen is sometimes you'll have a bit of an airspace here. And you think, oh goodness, what do I do? You do not want to leave the airspace, because this will continue to ferment. So sometimes when you start rolling with your apple cider vinegar and you start making a lot, I will take one of my other bottles. This is one that I've made several months ago, and I've been using this one. So I will take some of another batch that I've already made and fill this up until it almost reaches the top. Again, you don't want to fill it clear to the top. You want to leave just a little bit of an air space, but you don't want air in here because you don't want this fermenting anymore. So let me grab the other label that I've already set up here. Okay, Sharpie marker. I'm going to put the date, today's date. Okay, so out of that gallon jar, we now have a gallon of apple cider vinegar, ready to use right now or ready to sit and rest. And these will keep unrefrigerated for, oh my goodness, for years. I've had some that has been, let me think about this, probably 3, 4, 5 years old, and it's been absolutely excellent. It will, over a very, very long period of time, eventually start breaking down a little bit, but this is again why the pioneers used apple cider vinegar in mayonnaise and a lot of things as a preservative, is because it keeps incredibly well. All right, that's it for apple cider vinegar. I hope you enjoyed the video. I just want to again say, stir your vinegar every single day while it's fermenting. When it's in this stage, baby vinegar stage, make sure you stir this every day. Take the cap off, stir it. The other thing too is when it strains, when you're using this nice little bag here, or whatever bag that you decide to use, make sure you get all of the particles out of your finished vinegar, because I had one lady that I knew that did not do that. She used kind of a nut bag or a bag that had bigger holes in it, and some of that particulate, that mesh that was in there, or I'm sorry, the mash, the apple mash that was still in there kept fermenting. And that can actually be kind of dangerous, because then this is going to keep fermenting and build pressure. And again, back to bombs. You don't want to make an apple cider vinegar bomb. So make sure that you get all of that apple pulp out. That is really, really important, because she started having it burst out of the lid and bubbling over, and it just kept foaming and doing its fermenty stuff. And so the other problem with that is she probably did not let it ferment long enough. So again, 4 weeks is a really good amount of time to ferment, because most of the sugar is broken down, if not all the sugar is broken down at that point. And one final note that's kind of interesting, you can take a vinegar that has been fermenting for a month or so, and you can add more sugar to it. Say I went and got one of those, and it's like, ooh, let's put some more sugar in there. It will start bubbling and fermenting again, because those bacteria are saying, ooh, yum, brand new sugar. So just also keep that in mind for some reason if you need to get it going again. So, and on a final note, I've had some people ask me about the alcohol content in vinegars, and they will go through an alcohol stage. Anything that ferments that is a fruit will go through a very mild alcohol stage. The difference between some of your hard alcohols, wine or anything like that, versus vinegar is oxygen. When you're making alcohols, you actually have an anaerobic environment, meaning no oxygen. When you are making vinegars, as in like with this one, they're exposed to oxygen. You have an aerobic environment. When that happens, it will go through a minor alcohol stage, and then it will go into the vinegar stage. So if you're concerned about alcohol, first off, I would say with vinegar, don't be, because there is such a little teeny tiny amount that it really does not matter. And by the time it's done fermenting in 4 weeks, there is no alcohol left. The only catch with that is if you are using, again, those little tiny crab apples or any kind of a very, very dense small apple, make sure that they are grated or cut incredibly small, minced up, because they take a lot longer to ferment and they will be in the alcohol stage longer. I found that out one time. All right, so another question is, people say, well, then how much vinegar do you use? How do you use this vinegar? So one of the things that I will do is, this is one of the little glasses that I use a lot of times with supper, glass straw, which these are great. And so this has not been diluted. A lot of the vinegars that you buy on the market have been diluted, and I found them to be very ineffective when it comes to helping with digestion or boosting your stomach acid, which this is not hydrochloric acid, but it does help with digestion, and it also has a lot of enzymes in it and the good bacteria. So a lot of times with supper, I'll use, you probably can't see through my yellow shirt with the yellow liquid, but I'll use about this much, And I drink it with a straw because vinegar can be hard on your teeth. So if you do drink vinegar, make sure you wash your mouth out a little bit after you're done drinking it. But it is still so incredibly good for you. It's definitely worth it. You can dilute it if you want to. I just choose to not. And the difference in flavor with the homemade stuff versus what you buy is a world of difference, especially for the ones that have been fermented 2 weeks. Oh, just a world of difference. So if you thought, I tried vinegar a long time ago and it's nasty and it's bitter and it has a horrible flavor and it upsets my stomach. Yep, the store stuff does. It's nasty. This is not. This is a completely different ball of wax. And as far as I've been able to tell, you can't buy anything even remotely close to this. So is this worth your time in making? Absolutely worth your time. In fact, it's one of those things that I I believe in it so much. I have 3 gallons going right now in my kitchen. It's something that I depend on a lot. Let me just put it that way, a lot. You can also use it on your skin. You can use it for a lot of different things. And in fact, a lot of times when I cook, if I don't have lemons, and we don't grow lemons here in Wyoming, I will use this particular kind of vinegar, not the store stuff, this vinegar in guacamole or anything that requires lemon juice because it has more of a sweet, fruity flavor than this nasty acid flavor. So, and this is something that I also wonder too. There used to be a pie that the pioneers used to make and they called it vinegar pie. And when I first read about it, it's like, oh, that sounds terrible. No, because they were making their own vinegar. Again, it has more of a lemony kind of a sweet fruit taste than it does this acrid, nasty stuff. So bear in mind, this is not the same beast as what you've been used to buying in the stores. So give it a try. It's absolutely worth your time and enjoy.